this lecture pretty much takes up where the last lecture ended. Now we are going to move our archive and installer files to the new web host. However, if you were not quick enough to copy the login details in the previous lecture, I just want to show you how you can actually get access to those again. So you see here that we are in the FTP accounts section, and basically just click on the configure FTP client. And here you have the manual settings. Depending on which FTP client you use, you might connect on different ways. You see here that this particular web host offers an FTP configuration file. So this is basically a file that you import in the FileZilla, and basically it does all the work for you. However, I consider this being pretty straightforward, so I'm not gonna get into that right now. I'm gonna just use the manual settings, and let's go over to the FileZilla now. I just want to emphasize on that it doesn't actually matter which kind of FTP client you are using, because they pretty much serve the same purpose. So here you can enter the host. So let's copy the host that you should have saved in the previous lecture. So here is the host, ftp-mynewsitedomain.com. So let's just copy it, paste here. Next we need the username, ftp_account mysitedomain.com. Let's paste it here. Password. All right, so let's copy it. And finally the port. In most cases, the standard port for FTP is 21. However, it might differ from host to host, so make sure you check this anyway. So 21. Finally, it's time to try to connect. So let's do that and see what happens. All right, so it is basically asking us whether the server certificate is something to be trusted because it is unknown. However, this is a pretty much standard question you get. So I'm gonna just accept this and say, yes, it is fine, even if it is unknown. And here you can see that we are finally logged inside the web host of our new site. So let's just make this bigger a little bit. All right, so here we go. Here are basically the files that are used for installing WordPress. So however, considering that we are moving a completely new site, I'm going to go ahead and remove everything in this folder. I installed the WordPress in order to play around with it a little bit and test how it worked. However, as we are going to move a completely new site, I want to keep it fresh as possible. The only file we are going to leave is the .htaccess, which basically steers how the files are accessed outside. I'm gonna just mark this. This might look different depending on which host you are using, and if you have not installed anything, this is going to be pretty much empty with only few default files. Anyway, I always like to remove everything in order to be able to control things. I'm gonna just leave the .htaccess file, and I'm gonna remove everything inside this folder. So let's just do that. All right, I'm gonna remove this quickly. Delete. Yes, I really want to delete everything, so let's do that. So it is pretty much going slow. Up here it is deleting all the files, so this might take a while. So let's just pause it and take a coffee or something until this is done. All right, so finally I have been able to remove all of those files that we don't need actually. And now it is time to actually move the installer and archive file. If you have done everything right so far, you should have all of those files stored somewhere on a computer. So if you don't, make sure you find them, and then you're ready basically to transform them to your new host. Here I am inside the my new site domain, which is basically the root folder of my site. So I'm gonna just mark those two files, installer and archive, which is a huge zip file, just over 64 megabytes, and drag them here. All right, so depending on your internet connection, this might take a while. As you can see, I have pretty much high-speed internet, so this is going to be done in less than a minute. So in order to save time, I'm just gonna pause and wait for it to finish. All right, so you see that the installer has been transferred and the archive file as well. So we are pretty much basically done for this lecture. When this is achieved and the files are laying nicely there on our new web host in the root folder of our new site. Alright, so I'm gonna pause there, and I want you to get prepared for the next lecture where we are actually going to run the installer and finally also install our new site on our new domain. So stay tuned.